White continues with c4, aiming for a strong pawn center and possibly the queen's gambit. Black prepares to fianchetto the bishop with g6, heading towards the king's Indian defense setup. White develops a knight to c3, supporting the center and preparing for further development. Black fianchettos the bishop, putting pressure on the center and the e5 square. White develops the knight to f3, controlling the center and preparing to castle. Black castles, ensuring king's safety and connecting the rooks. White strikes in the center with e4, aiming to build a strong pawn duo. Black plays d6, controlling the e5 square and preparing to challenge White's center. White advances the e-pawn, attacking the knight and gaining space. Black captures on e5, accepting the challenge. White recaptures with the pawn, inviting a queen trade. Black decides to exchange queens, which can lead to a more balanced position. White recaptures with the knight, which now covers important squares. Black develops a knight to g4, aiming to exploit White's weakened pawn structure and eyeing the e5 pawn. White develops the bishop to f4, protecting the e5 pawn and preparing to castle. Black develops the knight to c6, adding more pressure to the e5 pawn and preparing to develop the rest of the pieces. White retreats the knight to e3, supporting the f4 bishop and preparing to potentially relocate the knight to a more active square. Black places a rook on d8, attacking White's backward d2 pawn and aligning with White's queen. White develops the bishop to e2, preparing to castle kingside and solidifying the defense of the f3 knight. Black develops the bishop to e6, preparing to exchange or gain control of key squares. White castles, ensuring king's safety and connecting the rooks. Black captures the knight on e5, which is a central piece and a key defender. White recaptures the knight, keeping material balance and ensuring a stable position. Black recaptures with the knight, simplifying the position and maintaining central control. White captures the knight with the bishop, further simplifying the position. Black recaptures with the bishop, keeping control of the light squares and maintaining material balance. This material black has a clear advantage in this position due to the more active pieces, better pawn structure, and potential for creating threats. White's passive pieces and weak d2 pawn put them on the defensive, making it difficult to generate counterplay. Black should focus on consolidating this advantage by increasing the pressure on White's weaknesses and looking for ways to further activate the pieces. Let's go back to this position after d6. What if your opponent moves to bishop e3? White develops the bishop to e3, supporting the d4 pawn and preparing to potentially push d5. Black plays e5, striking in the center and challenging White's pawn structure. White captures the pawn on e5, creating an open file for the rook. Black recaptures with the pawn, maintaining a strong presence in the center. White captures the black queen, forcing an exchange. Black recaptures with the rook, maintaining an active piece on the open d file. White captures the e5 pawn with the knight, gaining a central pawn and threatening to fork with knight takes c6. Black responds with knight takes e4, counterattacking and capturing a pawn while offering a knight trade. White captures the knight on e4, eliminating the threat and retaining material equality. Black recaptures with the bishop on e5, placing the bishop on a central square where it can exert influence. For this move, the material is balanced, with both sides having equal pawns and pieces. Black's pieces, especially the bishop on e5, are well placed and active, while White's pieces are also well positioned, but White needs to complete development. White aims to complete development with moves like bishop e2, castling king sides, rook d1 to utilize the open d file. Black will likely develop the knight c6, potentially fianchetto the dark squared bishop and look for active counterplay. After e5, White pushes the pawn, gaining space and kicking the knight. Black moves the knight to g4, attacking the bishop on e3. White retreats the bishop to d2, maintaining the center and avoiding the knight. Black pushes f5, aiming to open the f-file and attack on the king side. White attacks the knight on g4, but it's bad move. Black sacrifices the knight with nxf2, creating complications and aiming to open lines. White captures the knight, winning material. Black recaptures the pawn on e4, opening lines for an attack. White captures the pawn with the knight, centralizing it. Black checks with the queen, forcing the white king to move. White blocks the check with the knight, but it's a bad move. Black pushes the e-pawn, attacking the knight on f3 and aiming to open lines. White develops the bishop, attacking the e4 pawn. Black exchanges the bishop on c3. White recaptures with the b-pawn, opening the b-file and keeping the center strong. Black retreats the knight to d7, aiming to reposition to a better square. White centralizes the queen, attacking g7 and threatening c5. Black moves the knight to c5, attacking the queen and centralizing the knight. White moves the rook to e1, aiming to support the e4 square. Black doubles the rooks by moving rf4, attacking the knight on g3. White exchanges rooks on e4, capturing the knight. Black recaptures with the knight, centralizing it. White captures the knight, aiming to simplify. Black captures the pawn on g3, threatening a back rank check. White captures the queen, forcing an exchange. Black captures the rook on e4, gaining material. White develops the bishop, attacking the e4 pawn and completing development. Black defends the e4 pawn with re3. White attacks the e3 rook and gains control of the d-file. Black develops the bishop to f5, attacking the rook on d3. White captures the bishop, simplifying the position. Black recaptures with the pawn, maintaining material balance. White develops the rook to c1, aiming to activate it. Black brings the rook to e8, doubling the rooks and pressuring the e-file. In this position, Black's rooks are very active, especially along the e-file. White's rook on c1 is well placed but needs to find a good target. About the pawn structure. Black's pawns are more cohesive, while White has some weaknesses in the pawn structure, particularly the c3 and a2 pawns.